Hello and welcome to Season 8, Episode 1 of the Dualistic Unity Podcast. I am Ray, and of course, I am joined by Amanda. It's been a while since we've recorded one of these episodes. Hell, it's been a while since I did an introduction in one of these episodes. I remember Season 1, we used to get into some fun introductions like, Hi, I am the voice of what is, and Hi, I'm you in a different reflection. And that was always a lot of fun. But on the other hand, you can get kind of carried away with that stuff too. It can become the point of your life rather than just an expression of your life or the result of you living your life. And so I'm excited to be back. It's been a while because, frankly, we've been busy. It's so interesting how all of this has changed since we began the podcast, that we've went through almost phases where the podcast started a conversation that rippled online, that started developing an audience and a Discord discussion and groups on Patreon. And that led to in-person meetings at the retreats and other events. And at those meetings, we all got to connect and realize that despite our lives being so very different, there are very much commonalities that we all knew, but it was nice to see them. And so in this gap, we've been focused more on the commonalities rather than the discussion that led to us realizing they were there. Because it's the commonalities that are really the focus. And the commonalities come through application. Everybody goes through a moment of doubt. Everybody goes through a moment of temptation to make it about them versus about everything. We all go through this. And in relating on that level, we truly do connect in meaningful ways. And so it's been a nice break from the podcast and the conversation, though admittedly I have missed it because this conversation is a lot of fun. But the application is so rewarding when you are out there doing it day after day after day. And so we hope in this break, as busy as we've been in applying things and living our lives and growing dualistic unity, we hope that you have been just as busy. And we know that you have been. So I'm going to pass this over to Amanda. I just want to say again, hi. It's been a while. We hope to connect with you soon on social media or Discord or one of our Patreon groups.
Hello as well to you, listener. It has been a while, and yet it also feels like it was yesterday that we were engrossed in so many frequent conversations with words, because there are a lot of conversations that we do have without words, but um, it seemed like the frequency and the enthusiasm were both high, and although the enthusiasm has still remained, the frequency of our conversations has changed, because of a lot of new opportunities coming to our attention. It has been very interesting taking this break because it didn't feel like we were necessarily deciding that it needed to be a break. It just felt like circumstances and situations and opportunities were moving. And a break was the thing that seemed to be presenting itself, and it made the most sense. And although, I missed this conversation, and I'm really glad that we're having this episode today, because it is meaningful. I was about to say it's important, and I think it's only important because it's meaningful. And when you classify something as being important, it sometimes can take on this pedestal like um, portrayal. But something being meaningful is really why anything is important to you. And so the break is just as meaningful and just as important, even when a break may not seem like the thing that you were thinking, expecting, planning, imagining. But in that time, we've been able to apply all of the wonderful and exciting and challenging and confusing things that we were discussing with words. We were able to apply that with the application. And we got to see that the conversation and the application are one and the same, because in the conversation, you can talk about different things and you think you are talking about a different experience, but then underneath all of these labels and dividing concepts, there is no division. And so the application is the conversation. The conversation is the application. And although it may feel like we're doing one or the other, we are always doing the same, because there is no division, there is no separation, and that's why I said it feels like it's been a while, and it's good to be chatting with all of you. But it also feels like it was just yesterday, because ultimately it is the same thing that we were doing all those, days, weeks, months, whatever ago. We're doing the same thing. We have an opportunity in this space to choose to be open and honest and vulnerable, and to show up. And that choice was there in the conversations. That choice is available in application. That is still in many ways the same. And so, although we are kicking off season 8, episode 1 today, it is still very much the same conversation that I found all those years ago. And uh, I'm appreciating that there is an additional context that I am feeling now as we kick off this new season, that I didn't feel, and I didn't have the sensitivity prior. And it's like, of course not, because I had different expectations, I had different goals, I had different perspectives, I had different contexts, and I just want to say it's additional context, and I'm describing it in that way right now because I never want to make it seem like experience replaces experience. It's additional. It adds on to it. It's like another piece, another loop in the chain. It's not replacing, it's adding. And I love that many times I've heard you say, Ray, it's all game, because there are so many times where a situation, a role, a relationship, an opportunity, a job, some kind of dynamic changes, and it feels like we're grieving, because we are. And although we're grieving, there is a liberation, there's a freedom in new space being opened up. And so, like, the break wasn't something that any of us, at least I don't think, were expecting. But I do think that it has given us an opportunity to build different context than we would have had the situation not changed. And so I'm excited to share lots of updates, and Ray as well. We're going to share lots of updates because we have been doing so many things and seeing new faces to application, and one of those ways is that we started a nonprofit. We started a Spirit of Nanaimo Society that's going to be creating free community events, and the intention, the goal is to just create space, and to give the opportunity to choose, to either show up and be tense, show up and be relaxed, show up and have, a free pancake, some free pancakes at our event next spring, and just creating space in the same way that we were creating space to show up, to be honest, to be vulnerable, just to be there. And we did that with the podcast. We did that with the groups. We did that with the retreats. We do that with karaoke. We do that in so many ways. And so the Spirit of Nanaimo Society feels like it just kind of bloomed on its own, and we were just witness to that flower in the garden of life. But there's other things that we've been up to that are a little more for-profit business, but I will let Ray and let the conversation take its turns as we share many updates, but we can't share everything in one episode. So there's so much, and there's so much that I want to say, and to be honest, that's okay. And I know I won't be able to say it, and yet the show goes on.
Yeah, I had that difficulty in the previous attempt to record this episode. I think I rambled for 10 or 15 minutes before realizing that I was trying to shove everything that was going through my consciousness into one episode rather than realizing that everything has its time and its place. But it occurs to me, dear listener, that it is important to reflect on what are you trying to get out of this podcast or conversation, because there's a very big difference between trying to come out of this conversation being able to have the conversation the way you've heard it had versus coming out of the conversation applying the things that it's talking about. And so for me, I've never wanted to be a teacher. I've said this numerous times. I've never wanted to be regarded as a guru or somebody who is passing on worldly wisdoms at all. What I do enjoy, though, is for me, my life feels like I left the beaten path that I had been taught. And with every step, realized that as I wandered into the unknown, I was living in a way that I had only dreamt about, that I was actually living. Good and bad, I was in it. I was feeling it. And that has always been the case. And what I've talked about over the years is my experience venturing farther off the beaten path into the acceptance of uncertainty to just see where life takes me by being fully present in it and not trying to get anywhere in particular. And so that's kind of how I've seen myself in this podcast is a scout somewhere out on the edge of sanity and the false certainty that we've all been raised with, kind of shouting back what the experience is that I'm having from living in this acceptance of uncertainty. And so I want to get back to that for a second because if you've been listening to the podcast since the beginning, then what you've heard me try to communicate is what it is I'm experiencing and how fucking rad my life has become. That's not to say good all the time, pleasant all the time. I'm not happy all the time, but I am living. I don't feel the need to go jump out of a plane or do extreme sports or anything like that just to feel like I'm alive. I always feel like an exposed nerve. I always feel fully immersed in the experience that I am having. And what I'm happy to report, and what I've been happy to report since the beginning of this podcast, is that everything's going fine. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but everything is fine. Life continues on without the false certainty of thinking I know who I need to be or know what I need to do. Things are getting more and more interesting, in fact, and in ways that I would have never expected. Just like the retreats at one point were mind-blowing in that they existed and came out of nowhere from just having this conversation, the retreats yielded nightly karaoke. Now, years later, we find ourselves with an actual karaoke business in addition to the nonprofit that we've started. And through, and again, I want to say this, not through trying to get somewhere, but through being fully present in seemingly random conversations and making choices to embrace the unknown rather than to pursue what would make me comfortable. We've come to a place where Dualistic Unity has now purchased its own venue, that we have a location, that this may be the last episode that we are recording out of our home studio rather than our bar, our karaoke bar, which will be open 7 days a week to give a space for exactly the same thing that the podcast gave a space for venturing into the unknown, exploring new parts of yourself, finding out what happens when you take a chance and just have some faith. And you come out the other side realizing none of your fears were as bad as they felt. None of the limitations that you were convinced were absolutely set in stone were. And you feel a little bit more light and a little bit more able to connect and a little bit more willing to relate to other people who are still suffering under the same assumption that you just learned to challenge. And so I'm very excited that the venue is going to be opening in approximately a month. We got delayed by life, of course. There was a general employees union strike here in the province of British Columbia that went on for 8 weeks almost. And that, of course, delayed the transition of our licenses and inspections and a bunch of other stuff. But of course, in that time, we've had other opportunities to make other connections, other opportunities to meet people almost randomly half the time who will be working with us at this new venue. It's going to be incredible. But this has all come about through just living, not trying to get there, not thinking this is what I know is absolutely going to be the best thing, because We had no idea. We had no idea, but isn't it funny how well it fits in with the retreats, with the podcast, and with everything we've ever tried to communicate and everything that we try to apply in our own lives. And it's giving people a space to do that very same thing in small doses, which is really what changes in our lives are made of. Small changes, small decisions that inevitably lead us to a bigger leap. It could be the small choice to get up with your friend and sing karaoke if you're not willing to do it yourself. Hell, just to walk into a karaoke bar could be that small choice that leads you to have the faith in yourself to apply for a new job, to move to a city you've never been to say hi to somebody and make a new friend when you would have avoided it because you were afraid. So I'm really excited this has come to pass, but it's come to pass on its own. And I say on its own, but it's not on its own. It's as a result of everything I've become, everything Amanda's become, everything every single person that we've talked to has become. All of us, even the people we haven't talked to, because we're all moving together. This is all one thing in motion. And what I've been trying to say forever is that you don't need to be keeping track of it for it to be going well. You don't need to know how everything's going to end up for it to have an intelligence all of its own. But if you resist it, that's what you experience is your own resistance. So I'm excited, man. I really am. Everything we're going through is absolutely surreal. I want to say how much I appreciate you, dear listener. Whether you've ever talked to us or not, whether you've come to Patreon, whether you've been on our Discord or come to our retreats or met us in person, it doesn't matter. Because as I said, we're all connected. We appreciate your attention on this podcast. We appreciate that you are helping other people find this podcast. And through ripples like that, we've managed to get to where we are. And so, with gratitude, I want to give a shout out to everybody who's helped us get here over the last 4 or 5 years, hell, over my entire life, but specifically for the podcast. To all of you, thank you. This is incredible. I can't wait to share more with you. And I can't wait to hear about what's happening in your lives as you apply this. Because I know as we connect with other audience members through our Patreon groups, which are still happening, and offline, because of course sometimes they visit the island where we're at, we hear stories about people applying this stuff in their lives. People who have made the decision to focus on living rather than wondering when is the podcast going to come back. So that way, the lessons they learned while living make the podcast that much more relatable and enjoyable because that's all we're doing is communicating what it's like for us to live. And so I'm very stoked. I'm going to pass this back to Amanda, but that's one of the big things that's been happening. And of course, we've posted some behind the scenes stuff on our Patreon page. The day we got the key, walking into the bar, we had a couple of repairs done. There's more on the way, people. Definitely come and check it out.
Oh yeah, and boy is there so much to learn. It's every single moment is just feeling everything, whatever's coming up, and it has been very inspirational to be able to dive in this conversation with everyone all those years ago, and for everyone to show up however they did, and regardless of the difference in inspiration, we all ended up there, and we all contributed, and we all gave whatever we could to that moment, and that led to the next one and the next one, and here we are today. So thank you so much for showing up, and showing up for you, even if you thought it was for someone else. Like like a choreography dance, bring it back to one. You bring it back to yourself. The reason why you show up at work, the reason why you show up in your relationships, the reason why you show up at the podcast, in the groups, in day to day with your friends is for you, and it should be for you, because you are your whole life, and you are your whole experience, and we all get to share in the experience of being on our own, being our own whole life. And although that may not be reflecting the unity and the connection that's underlying all of the individual experiences, it still is meaningful and it still is a priority and should remain a priority, because the minute that a conversation in a specific context with specific parameters or a person or a role, when that becomes the solution, when that becomes the break from your real life, then you've turned what could have been a tool, a resource, into a crutch. And you end up finding out the same lesson in the end, that you were looking to show up in your own life for you because you were enough, because you were reason enough. Like, if you're not worth it for your life, then what could be? And the conversation was always bringing us back to one, was always bringing us back to the experience of being here, being existence. And the conversation, the podcast, the book, the karaoke, the retreats, that was all supposed to be just an addition, a reflection. It was never supposed to be the substitute or the foundation. You are the foundation. And so there's such a deep appreciation for people showing up in their lives for them, and finding out what that means to them, because I could never understand what this podcast or what this journey has meant to Ray, and the way that he understands what it means to him, and how he's lived through his understanding of his experience is something that I could maybe imagine, but I would never be able to say that I truly could place myself in his shoes. And the same is true for you, and it goes vice versa. And so there is a deep appreciation for just being able to show up for yourself without making it into a concept, and grounding yourself in the experience of being you.
That was well said. I wanted to give one more shout out because I know last year, a little over a year ago now, we had our first investor round. And a number of people that we have gotten to know through the community and events and group discussions online decided that they were going to put the fruits of their labor, the results of their time and the effort that they put into their life into helping dualistic unity become a real thing. I describe it almost like it's Pinocchio becoming a real boy, but it really is the difference between dualistic unity existing as an electronic environment that reaches people electronically through the internet, through audio, through video, but rarely in person. And through their investment, again, of their own effort and time into dualistic unity, they helped it become something real in the world. Real in the world in a way that's going to help it to continue to expand. Because what I enjoy about what's happening with dualistic unity is that we're getting to have an impact in a very real way, in a way that's very meaningful to me, and I'm sure meaningful to everybody else. Having our own venue means that not only are we providing a space for our customers, but for the people who work for us. And specifically for me, I like to think of it as working with us because it's everybody's impact that matters. And if everybody who works with us are working on their own lives individually, they have a life, they have hobbies, they're doing things for their own interest, they're doing things for their own growth, then they are going to bring that into the venue. And I know as a person who's tried very hard to bring that into other jobs and working for other employers in an environment where it's not welcomed or even recognized for being as important as it is so very cool to be able to provide people of that mentality with an environment where they're not being shit on and they're not being looked at as somebody who works below somebody else, but they are recognized for being as important to the whole picture as everybody else. I love that dualistic unity is going to be able to provide a few people to start with a livable wage, an environment that they enjoy going to and that they don't carry home with them when they're done. something that actually feels fulfilling because you go there being fulfilled and you leave there knowing that you helped other people be a little bit more fulfilled themselves because they chose to and you didn't get in their way or didn't tear them down because you felt like shit. That in itself is so exciting to me. And I just want to say again, thank you to everybody who helped make that happen. Now, we aren't done. We have a taste for it now. So we want to make more environments for more people and provide more quality services and events and volunteer opportunities and examples of what's possible when we don't put ourselves first, when we recognize that to be one, we all have to be in it together. That to be one, we all have to be whole in ourselves and stop needing before we give to anybody else. Because a rising tide lifts all ships. We know this. And so we're looking at other opportunities here in Nanaimo and on the island. We are looking at other businesses currently that will also provide plenty of opportunities to mingle with the community and to employ people and to change lives and to continue to express whatever is possible. That's really what this has been. What's possible when we let go and find out? And we're still finding out. And so I'm very excited. I want to throw it very quickly, of course, that we do have another investment round coming up, our second one. If you are interested, we would love to invite you to the presentation. Just go to dualisticunity.com/invest, fill out the information, and let us know what it is you're interested in. And of course, we'll get back to you when we're having that presentation. It's coming up soon because we have more expansion in the very near future. And with the Nonprofit Society having its first community event in the spring, we've got a couple of months here to move rapidly. So we're looking for people who also want to jump on board and ride this crazy train with us to see where potential and faith take us. I know at this point you're thinking, wow, Ray sounds really excited. And I am really excited because, again, my life is still complicated. I am still living a human experience. I still go through the emotions of frustration and regret. I still go through moments of doubt. I still go through moments where I'm trying too hard. Like I go through all of that, but I'm aware of it as I'm going through it. And I'm not running away from it as it's happening because I know the feeling will pass. Or better, it will yield a lesson. That feeling will yield some other gain, some other return in the long run because it does. I was saying this to somebody recently, and it's obvious when you really think about it. But if it weren't for the experiences you've gone through, you really wouldn't be able to relate to anybody. We all think to ourselves, if only we could be perfect. But you would be an insufferable ass. You wouldn't be able to relate to anybody or any of their experiences of pain. They would be telling you how difficult things are, how much they beat themselves up, how much it's a challenge to feel like they're enough going through life. And you'd be like, wow, I've never experienced that. That's crazy. Why? I can't imagine what that's like. It would be very difficult to have a conversation with you. So the fact that you go through things, the fact that you experience pain and doubt and fear is a gain. It's a gain because it makes it easier to connect. And I mean this. In the last year of watching this, I say business, but it's the same ripple that it's always been. In the last year of watching this grow, it really has been incredible to watch how much of it has been organic, how much of it has just been a result of the very thing that I've been saying since the beginning of this podcast. Just have some faith in yourself, see where it leads. And before you know it, people are mentioning opportunities to you. People are talking to you about things that are going on in their life. And you find that you actually can relate until you start thinking about reasons that you can't. Somebody was saying this recently. I don't remember who it was, but well, I haven't gone through the things that you've gone through in your life, so I can't understand. And while that's true, the point remains that no, but you've gone through things. You've experienced pain, you've experienced guilt, you've experienced fear and resent and regret and shame and self-judgment. You may not have experienced them in the same way or through the same people that I did, but you experienced them. And so, as much as we can't always relate to what people have gone through, we can relate to going through. All of us can relate to the going through. And when you have some faith in that, you really do find that we are connected and you don't have to look for ways that we are. You just be yourself. And before you know it, everybody else is talking to you about their struggles in being themselves or their victories in being themselves. And that makes the journey. It's an incredible journey because you really start to realize that we're all going through the same thing, struggling with having faith in who we are, struggling with the idea that we're enough for the moment that we're in. And then we create obstacles that weren't there by thinking that we're not enough. We create a whole other challenge by needing to feel like we're more instead of just feeling like we're not enough and continuing on until that feeling changes into something else.
The struggle is real, people. And the nuances are the the specific pieces of an experience that are unique to us. But feeling is universal. I may feel specifically in a unique way, but we all share the experience of feeling. And I I almost don't, in some ways I don't feel like it even needs to be used in a plural word like feelings, because feeling is just a feeling. It doesn't seem like there really is such a hard line between sadness and relief, between doubt and fear, between joy and attachment. Like all of those feelings don't really feel like such a hard line in the sand has been drawn between this or that. So feeling just is just a feeling. It's just an experience, and it varies in depth, in nuance, in in the embodiment, but I've been learning so much from my capacity to feel both feelings, quote unquote, that I think are compatible or incompatible or confrontational. It I was feeling a lot, a recent morning, and I was feeling both a grief about a role that I thought that I wanted to be, and a relief that I didn't have to pursue that role anymore. But I felt both of those feelings, and then I felt a happiness and a lightness, and then I felt an anger at myself for pursuing that. I felt stupid. I felt so all of a sudden what felt like one feeling led to another feeling, felt like six feelings. And I was like brushing my hair and I was crying and laughing and feeling like an emotional wreck. But is that a wreck? Or was it just that it was just the walls came down, and the waves of different emotions were blending into one sea of feeling? And I I have been learning so much from just the experience of letting myself feel whatever I may be feeling, and seeing that it is okay. Things are okay. I felt like an emotional wreck, and then I felt free. And so things don't have to be so black and white in the conversation, because things are not black and white in reality. And that is an important thing, I think, a meaningful reminder to give myself, because it's very easy to zoom in on one piece of a conversation or of an experience, and to think that that is dictating the rest, just because you can't see anything else.
Because that continues to be the struggle. And I know we talked about this recently. We even messed around a little bit with a graphic that might communicate this. But when we were in, say, grade school or going back as far as kindergarten, there were images on the wall, and they were always very simplistic because, of course, we were learning simplistic concepts. You would have like the four images for the four seasons, and winter was always a snowflake, and fall was always a leaf, and summer was a big sun, and the same simplistic imagery was used for something as complex as emotions, because we have to learn how to communicate what it is that we're feeling. But in communicating it, we're also learning to exclude it from everything else. And so we'd have a face for happy. We'd have a face for sad. We'd have a face for angry. We'd have a face for afraid, and we'd have a face for all of these different things. But we almost started to assume that they happened individually, that you had to only be experiencing one at a time. And then we see movies like Inside Out, for example, that are communicating as we get older, our feelings get more complex. And it's because those feelings are expressing our own complexity. And by not engaging with the feelings, by not allowing the feelings to continue through and do whatever it is they're doing and have the experience of them, we're not engaging with our own complexity. We're not engaging with ourselves. And that's what helps us develop as people, or an awareness, or a person, however you'd like to put it, but it helps you develop. And so it really is. And I know this sounds so unsatisfying, but just sit through it. Just sit through it. Carry on. Keep calm and carry on. That's really it. Even if you find yourself panicking, just remember, panicking about panicking isn't going to help you. Just feel it. But a lot of what we go through is the desire to avoid what we're feeling, to get out of what we're feeling, to feel something that we would like better, or at least that we think we would like better. And that does nothing but create a different form of toxicity and addiction. But it's the sitting through our feelings that teaches us what people commonly refer to as patience. I find it really funny how often people will say to me like, "Oh, you're so calm." And they have no idea that I just took 2 or 3 good solid breaths to stop myself from saying 10 or 20 different things that went through my head during those breaths, because I know I would have been reacting, I would have been dealing with something, I would have been lashing out. And that's the thing, in those breaths, you're like, right, I'm a complex human. And that's it. You're really taking in the fact that you're a complex human that feels a lot of things about everything. Take a breath. Allow yourself to absorb and then respond. And that is okay, but we panic. Like if I don't respond fast enough. And a big part of that is the continuing struggle with the idea that while things are important to you, they don't mean anything about you. And because we think everything means something about us, the struggle is so much harder. We can't just do what we're doing and then move on to the next thing that we're doing without thinking about the person we think is us and defining them on a spectrum of positive to negative before we can move on to the next thing, which does nothing but either make us rush forward to the next thing recklessly or hold back going to the next thing out of fear. And it's just that flow of just live your life and stop trying to judge your progress. And what you find is that you get a lot more life and a lot less judgment.
Damn right. I I resonate with that. It's very hard to think and live at the same time. I can think about what I should be doing, but that's not the same thing as doing, and this reminded me of like little pep talks I would give myself, where it's just like I am trying to get myself out of my head, in many ways. And that's my relationship with me. I'm like, let alone controlling everything outside of my head. But it was just, if I'm thinking about it, I'm not doing it. And if I'm thinking about what could go wrong, then truly I'm thinking about nothing because it hasn't happened yet. And no matter how believable, how real a hypothetical, a imagined scenario can feel, it's not reality. It's not happening. What is happening is outside of my thinking about what's happening, no matter how right or wrong or confused I may feel, or all of the above. Where's the select all button? Um, But it's it gives me so much to work with because that is the potential in that moment is the feeling of not knowing what's right or doubting making the right choice, being worried that I don't have the sensitivity to learn how to do something in a way that works was a big thing that I would focus on. And that was such a deterrent from even trying. And the things that I admired about the people that I thought were the masters and the experts and the leaders or the people that were admirable, you know, they put in so many reps that I'll never be able to see. I'll never be able to see their first time trying something. I'll never be able to see the time they almost, sliced off a finger in the kitchen or the time that they, dropped a perfectly good soup in on the floor or a perfectly good sauce or something, like I'll never see the times where they were on the brink of giving up, when they were doubting themselves and thinking, I'm so stupid for even trying. How many times does that thought come across your head? And you're not the only one, but it's so easy to think you're the only one. And in one way, you are the only one going through your specific experience with your nuances, and you are the only one who is going through that. And that is true, but that doesn't eliminate, substitute, remove, or disregard or dismiss every other experience happening around you. And they're all there, they're all here, but what isn't here is what I think about what's happening. And that's the thing that I need to remind myself, or not need to, but choose to. I can, because then, it's not about making a rule that only I have to follow, because then that's putting pressure where there doesn't need to be pressure. You don't have to put pressure on potential. The potential's already there. So you can work with what's already there. And just when you feel the tension, when you feel the pressure, being honest that there is tension, that you are feeling excited to choose and nervous and doubtful and all of that. Because all of that feeling, the experience of feeling is always there. It's always here. And that sometimes would help me snap out of a thought is, what feeling am I either running from or running to? And usually it was one of the two. And instead of running to one or running to or from anything, it was just being okay that they were both in the room. And so was I, so was existence, so was everything else, so was all the potential that I was worried about spending or molding or making. All of that was still there, and the pressure didn't need to be. And if the feeling of pressure was there, that's okay. It's also there, and also wasn't a substitute. And so it's being able to make more space mentally and literally or physically.
Absolutely. And what you find is that as you make more space to be yourself, there is more space for you to express yourself. I find that to be just fascinating that the reason things continue to expand with dualistic unity and with the business that I started and ran before dualistic unity was because I was expanding. As new jobs and new challenges came up, rather than shrinking from them into my idea of myself and the safety of false certainty, I dared to step forward and to see what would happen. And we continue to do that every day. I know in the last month alone, we have learned more about running a bar than I thought I would ever learn, right down to the health and safety procedures, the fact that ice is considered a food and requires a different kind of license, just stuff like that, that there is a job specifically for cleaning the tap lines on a draft beer dispenser. I had no idea that was a specific job. So many things that I've learned about in the last month, and only because I've dared to say, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I'll try that. Oh, what seems to be the problem there? And that's it. It's just engaging with life without needing to feel like you're succeeding, without needing to judge whether or not you're failing, and just continuing on. That's really it. And it's incredible how much life just unfolds because you are. because you're unfolding. And there really is an impact in terms of, see, I was going to say in terms of your experience with other people, or rather their experience of you, but that's almost secondary and unimportant. The impact is that you feel fulfilled being your life, because you're not telling yourself you need to be something else. You're not telling yourself you can't be yourself yet. You're not telling yourself you need to be more. And in that lack of telling yourself anything at all, you feel complete and surreal things start to happen. And I'm stoked to be back to recording the podcast. I'm stoked to be back to having this conversation. But I have to reiterate this one more time. This is really about letting go and having faith in yourself and just seeing what happens. It's not about an end result, because any end result that you think you want is based on the way you are experiencing your life right now. And if you want an end result, you're not coming from a place where you're going to get the most out of your life because you're wanting. It's really about taking what you have, embodying it fully, deciding it's enough, and then letting it grow into something else. But it's like we start to grow a little plant. We don't like how the plant is turning out. So we just chuck the plant and want it to be a different plant, but not to have to regrow it again. Right. And it's like, no, no, just start where it started and grow from there. And that's not how things work. The plant needs time to evolve. The plant needs time to grow into something else. You don't even know what that plant is. Because I'll tell you right now, when I started growing the podcast, I never expected it to open a karaoke venue. That is not something that was anywhere on the map. I didn't even think that's something I would like or enjoy. This is not something I've ever thought to myself. You know what my life needs? To run a karaoke venue. I've never thought of that. And as much as I love karaoke, and I do, I love karaoke, I love everything about the potential that lies in karaoke. For that very reason, I've never thought I should do it as a job. I've never thought it should be something that adds to my survival or employment. And yet here I am. And the reason I'm enjoying it so much, the reason I get so much out of it is frankly because I'm not saying anything to myself about it. I'm not stopping to go, well, this isn't what I wanted out of life. I'm not stopping to think, well, if I had this kind of business, people would look at me a different way. I'm not stopping in any way to make this about my opinion more than it's about what's happening. And that is a leap of faith, because we very much want to assess how we're doing, where it's going, and whether or not we're going to get what we want out of it. Very much. But in our need to assess that, in our giving in to the temptation to assume we can assess that, we fall victim to the entire emotional spectrum that goes with that. And it's all around that fiction that you think is you. Whereas the alternative is that you can just be life. You can just be. And in that, you will find your connection to everyone and everything, whether they recognize it or not, because it's not philosophical, it's not spiritual, it's not conceptual. It's simply what is all the time. We superimpose thoughts above it, but that doesn't change what it is. The fact that we believe the world is divided does not make it so.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, we're going to wrap up this episode very, very quickly, but I wanted to give a shout out to everyone, everywhere, once again, because we are all in this together. And accepting that has been the single biggest influence over my life. Not accepting it philosophically or conceptually, but actually just letting go and letting it be what it is has changed everything. So thank you so much for being on this journey. Thank you so much for being on your journey. And again, reach out, connect with us, come and shoot the breeze. Even if it's not on Patreon, drop a comment on one of our social media channels. Let us know how you're doing, because we would like to know. We know you're growing. We all are.
Thanks so much for joining us. This has been quite the first episode to season 8, and excited to see where it goes and to hear more about everyone else's experience and to share more of our own.
Hell yeah, it's good to be back. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon. Take care, everyone.